It is going. It
It is
goes.
going to Athens, I think.
I'm on my way to the cradle of civilization. Yeah.
That's not so
See.
bad.
Yeah. It is
Yes.
not so bad.
We go see the Acropolis.
Going to see the Acropolis.
You
Yep.
do?
Yep. Temple of
Nice.
Delphi, stuff like that.
Mm,
Then I'm going to Hydra Island, where Leonard Cohen wrote the fabulous book Beautiful Losers, and most of his great early songs.
nice.
It's an island with no cars. It was a hot it was a hot spot in the 1960s for, you know, you know, rock stars and poets and things like that.
Yeah,
Anyway, it's we're going with the family.
fantastic. Yeah, so this will be our last episode for August, I think. Then we going ahead in September with new
Hmm.
courses
Tons
and
of
new
courses
stuff.
in September, all kinds
Yeah,
of courses in
yeah.
September. Checked it out on our Mighty Networks page. Now we
Also
have
on our webpage. So a new course that I just added is a 6 week autumn course on Zajic and magic ritual and theory with Layman Pascal and Rachel Hayden. That will start October the 5th and go on for 6 weeks. Additional campfires, tickets on the website. And I think in November there will be also a course with Daniel Christian Wahl on regenerative cultures, but that's not on the website yet. So that's that from me. You have also some courses going on, no?
cool. Yes, I do. And if you're very disturbed by the occultic kind of courses, we have a course on Christianity just to balance it out. We have a course on Christianity and Gurdjieff. If you're afraid of the magic and the occult stuff, which and Layman Pascal, of course, is a very dangerous fellow, so be careful of him. Just
He's
want to say
very
that to
dangerous.
everybody. He's a bit of a guru, I think. Yeah.
No, no, he's so nice, but he fucks with your mind.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you want to get your mind fucked, join Tom's course. And
Yes.
if you want to learn about the relationship to Gurdjieff and Christianity, we have a course in October. We also have a course with Guy Senstock, who is a ball mystic from the Western Balls kind of a Hindu tradition, an excellent teacher of all things Eastern and well, not even Eastern, but just very direct, kind of non-dual um, Advaita stuff. And then we also have a course with Zach Stein, Mark Gaffney, which was rescheduled for September. It's going to be great. A lot of people already signed up for that. So come and join our Parallax Academy, which is, I was looking at the Peterson Academy online, and we started before them. We're doing the same thing as they do. They have eight
They
hour
do the same
style
thing that we
courses,
do.
but we were way before them. I just want everybody
Yeah.
to know that we're way before the Peterson Academy, and we're much better than them. Actually, we have more interesting content.
Yeah, well, I mean, it looks shiny, but because I mean, Peterson is a fucking millionaire.
They're a
And
pretty face, but we're where the real action is at.
no, we are the avant-garde, we are pushing
Uh-huh.
the envelope. We are
We're
like
pushing the
approaching.
fucking envelope.
Yeah, we are dipping not only our feet into chaos and disorder, but we jump into the abyss of the soul and see what mighty forms might emerge and shape our collective and psychological future. So
Did
it's
you
not.
think of that sentence just now?
Yes, I did.
Because we could use that as like, a real plug, So dip your feet into the abyss with Parallax.
No, no, we jump quite full in it.
Jump fully into the abyss. Yeah, right.
Yes.
That's the difference between Peterson and Academy is they just dip their toes in, but we go
Even
all the
if
way.
I don't know if they even do, it's just like
Mhm, mhm.
I mean it's shiny and it's I mean everybody has their place, I would presume. And
Yes,
our
we're better
place,
though. Come on, Tom. We're just
no, we
admit
are
that
of course we're
we're
better.
far
When you're
superior to
talking,
them,
of
and
course we're
probably
better.
every way, right?
In
Mhm.
every possible way.
The
Yes.
only thing that's perhaps a little bit similar is we're not ideological, we're not woke, we'll do whatever, but the rest, we're just miles beyond them. We're
Yeah, well, the
so much
idea is
better.
that we shed ideological possession and we try
Yes.
to we try to shed of all all of our positions and jump into the abyss, because that's what it's about.
Right.
So that's what avant-garde and the occult and all of this actually means. It's like you got rid of your limits and boundaries and concepts and ideas and metaphysics, and you for a moment you dive into it, and then you reemerge as maybe somebody else. And so
Yeah.
what we are doing basically is a digital rites of Aloysius. These temples, these ancient temples of the Greek or the Roman. I think it was the Greek, actually, where they had these public events once or twice a year, this kind of carnival events.
Mhm.
But then you also had the rites of Aloysius, where you would go into these catacombs. You were not supposed to talk about it. If you would talk about it, you would be killed, like quite literally.
Yeah.
But you were sitting in these tombs, in these catacombs, and you would take, psycho-enhancing drugs, or you're doing sexual rituals, and you would get introduced and initiated into the deep secrets of the cosmos. And so obviously these kinds of occult rites don't exist anymore. But I think I think like that what we're doing, not necessarily we alone, because there are like different groups that
Yeah.
do the same kind of thing. But I think that's the kind of thing that is happening, like, okay, so we are globally connected now, but the ritual is still there. And what we're trying to do is to provide a space um, to emulate the kind of effects that these rites of Aloysius had 2,000 years ago.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, there's a way in which I disagree. I think these things still exist. They're just not easy to find. And I think, yes, I think we're emulating them. That's for sure. And I think that is really, in fact, that is what education is, right? It's an immersion in a secret world where you learn, you go into something and you come out of it. You can talk about having mystical visions and having it going into aesthetic states and sexuality and all that. That's part of it, but it's also it's just what life is. It just models life, It
Right.
models what our existence is, and that is we have our public cells and we have our private cells. We have our private esoteric worlds, and then we have our public exoteric worlds, and there's this constant back and forth between these two worlds. And I think the podcasts that we do and the interviews are more in the public sphere, and then the courses are a way for people to go into that kind of private sealed learning environment. And yeah, and then when they come out, there ideally there is some sort of a transformation or some sort of insight that's garnered, um, that will help them, and or that will illuminate their existence, right?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know how to phrase that properly, because the whole thing is a circle. So you have mainstream, and then you have avant-garde. But if you really go deep into the avant-garde, it's like, even if you do it in philosophy, if you really go into the strange things stuff, then on the other side you come out as mainstream, because it will influence the mainstream.
Hmm.
I mean, the ideas of Hegel and Schopenhauer, they're quite occult, still.
Sure.
And so that's the weird thing, because they went so deep into the avant-garde, into, the architecture of mind, spirit, and cosmos, that they came out the other end, and still are highly influential about how we think about, all these things. And they're still part of the public discourse. And that's what I mean. It
Hmm.
appears as a circle. It's like you can't be stuck just in the avant-garde stuff. You have to go so deep into it that you emerge on the other side. And that's like obviously just another framing of the hero myth. It's like you start somewhere, you go into the deep, and you go and go, and then you go back to society.
Yeah.
It's this internal circle. And it's not just a journey that you do as an individual in your process of individuation. It's also something, what should have happened if you leave mainstream thinking, go into avant-garde, go to the margins, go to the beyond the margins, and then you come back with new knowledge firmly embedded in the main discourse, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's why you would even go on a trip. I'm going on a trip with my family on vacation, and it's like I'm pretty comfortable here in my little house in my garden, but you have to go outside of the boundaries of the known, and you go out there and you gather, new information and bring that inside. I think the original shamans were the only ones who could actually leave the circle, right? So
Right.
there's the circle, but then there's leaving the circle, and the circle has to have a let's say semi-permeable boundary, and certain people can leave and go out into the liminal space, and the liminal space, is full of monstrosity and beauty and new information, and then you bring it in.
Yeah, but
Um,
that's still the circle, isn't it?
well, there's an inside. Well, the circle without center or periphery. How about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, because of the hero myth, that's what the hero myth is about. You
Yeah.
leave the city, and then you go into the beyond, into the cave,
Hmm.
into the abyss, and then you reemerge after symbolic death.
Yep. And then, well,
Yeah,
there's a limit to that, because I like the Zen ox herding things, because there's the hero myth is within that, but it's not the whole story, right? The whole story is the guy comes home at the end and he gives gifts to the community, but then the lot then there's just nothing at the end, right?
yeah,
Or has the emptiness happened before that? I don't remember, but there's like 10 different stages and of. Mhm. And then we can look at that on the grandiose scale, and you can look at that on a microcosm, and the fact that they're all sort of mutually interpenetrating, non-obstructing, circles within circles within circles, like the Indra's net.
right.
um
No, but I'm just thinking about this because I mean, we trying to set up the Parallax Publishing for January, no? So with two upcoming books, one is one book of yours, one is one
yeah.
of mine, and so what I'm working on is a book about the phenomenology of will, basically. And so in this context, I've read like a quote from Nicholas Taleb, and he said, if you want to write a book, don't write a book in the way what you think expect people to read today or tomorrow, like in the spirit. Don't be too modern.
Mm.
Write a book in the spirit of, okay, that could have been read 200 years ago, right? And
Hmm.
so, because those books already proved to be successful, and so I really found that interesting to not what's the proper word? Not to cater to exclusively to modern sentiments and feelings and problems, but write it in a kind of way that are so deep and abstract that they would have read 200 years ago. And
Mm.
that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to write this book, and it has quite an antiquated title, The Phenomenology of Will. But I write it with a kind of modern sentiment in an old way,
Hmm.
right? So it's like, of course, our notions, evolutionarily going forward of will have to be reactualized in a kind of way. And our concepts of will and love, they kind of develop because we are developing. It's like, oh, for example, the Prussian ideal of will as a monocausal kind of thing. I'm doing something and it has one effect, right? That
Hmm.
that is not really suitable for our complex world anymore. So you have to reactualize it and remodel it in a kind of way. But you still have to write it as if Schopenhauer or Hegel would have written it in style, maybe in the way of depth, and I think that's what Taleb means, because then you're applying to universal, then you're speaking to universal principles, and then a book gets read because
Yep.
it's not just a fad, it's not just something that comes and goes, but you're contending basically with universal problems and universal principles, and
Hmm.
that makes a book going from where you are now to the avant-garde and going circle-wise back to the issues at hand, to the profane. Basically, you go profane, sacred, profane in a kind of
Yeah,
way.
I love that actually because the people I like, the artists I like usually, they always seem to be out of place in the modern world. Like
Right.
if I look at I don't know, somebody like um well, I always, Henry Miller always thought he belonged in the 19th century, and then Ivan Illich said he belonged in the 12th century, and I think that there's a paradoxical thing, is that the most radical, innovative types of artists are always kind of anachronistic. They're playing with things that are lost and forgotten, and they're bringing them back.
Right.
Like Bob Dylan was. He actually wasn't the 60s. He was the 50s. He was before his time and ahead of his time at the same time. So if you're before your time, if you have something quality of ancient or old to you, then there's a depth there that makes you actually more relevant to the future than whatever the stupid culture war is, happening right now, which is just
Exactly. So even
is
with the
mhm.
Beatles, because you have, so many songs that are derived from Bach,
Yeah, there you go.
explicitly. And so like
Mhm.
what Bach did was to channel some universal, melodies and some, I don't have the proper musical speech, but the language for it. But I mean these were like you know sequences of accords and chords and whatever. So these are like the basic foundations of our Western understanding of
Mhm.
music. And so
Mhm.
the Beatles were like tapping into that because like if you look at like Blackbird, that is just Bach. And Paul McCartney said this, that it's just a variation of Bach.
Of
It's nothing
course.
else. And so of course then you have sorry, but it's just you have like this tapping into these old structures with a tiny bit of modern clothing, but it's still the old thing.
Yeah, well, it's a new thing, but it's based in the tradition.
Right,
So it has to be the thing that a lot of people don't understand, I think, with avant-garde or with modern stuff. They did just contemporary, right? Like avant-garde, like James Joyce when he wrote Ulysses, he was drawing on very old stuff, and but making it entirely modern.
right.
But he wasn't just making something out of nothing that he thought was cool. He was delving into the Greek myths in order to make something contemporary.
Yeah,
So he was bringing back the Greek myths and making them alive within the character of Harold Bloom, making the whole voyage of Ulysses as the everyman experience rather than some exalted
right,
far away thing. So I think that it makes sense that the lineage of the Beatles would be Bach, and it makes sense that the lineage of all the good singers would be rooted in something deeper and older and more traditional, because everything comes from this deep well of the collective unconscious in a way, and so I think like the reason contemporary art often sucks is it's not avant-garde because it doesn't use the past. It just tries to take a snapshot or an image of the present and says this is art. Um, but then it's very old very quickly.
right. Exactly, because it lacks, the historic depth, and that's, one critique you could utter to, lots of modern literature that it just focuses on the future, and the issues and the problems and the complexities without integrating, the deep historical wealth of philosophy, and the different strands of philosophy and the discourse. So but you have to tap into these old kind of issues because of course we developed as humans, but we're still facing the same existential problems. You can't just, it's like Wilbur gets a lot of shit, but it's like one thing that he gets absolutely right is that in all of his philosophy he integrates different strands of philosophy, and this is like, for example, idealism. And you can have different opinions about idealism, but this is a valid kind of idea that has a long, long tradition. And what happens now is that in a lot of critique of Wilber, people don't content with idealism, and sometimes they don't even know what it is. And so they don't get at least 50% of Wilber's argument, they don't get because they don't content with the historical strand of philosophy, which is idealism. And you can't just swipe it away with your hand. It's just, oh no, that's nonsense. No, there's like 800 or 1,000 years of philosophers that were way smarter than you, that contented with the idea that, crystallized in idealism, right?
Mhm,
And what
mhm.
Wilber did, he was wrestling also with it, and also with
Yeah.
other streams of philosophy. And so then to have a reception of Wilber that doesn't account for, in this sense of idealism, and Fichte and Schopenhauer and all these people, and Kant, and let's say Hegel's rejection of idealism and his intent to overcome it. And so all these things you find in Wilber, but the
Mhm.
strange is you don't find it in most contemporary articles about Wilber, because it's like, but this is also because
That's
Wilber
because they're
is,
contemporary and they suck because
yeah,
they're contemporary.
yeah,
Everything
no, exactly,
contemporary sucks, basically. Everything
exactly.
that is contemporary sucks. I make this blanket statement because it has no depth. I mean, it's the same thing about, I guess the accusation that he usually gets is that he's some kind of a guru and a new age guru and da da da. But they don't even know what that is because they're just basing the guru on California style cult gurus and this and that. They don't know the Indian traditions at all. And the great masters Aurobindo and Ramana Maharishi and Nisargadatta and the incredible tradition also that's not even in the West that Wilbur is drawing from. Vajrayana Tantric Buddhism, Advaita, all of these things, which the German idealists knew very little about, except for perhaps Schopenhauer, and that was he barely knew so that's a huge thing that I think that people in the West tend to dismiss completely. And so that people who dismiss Wilbur dismiss his integration with that because people in the West who are brought up with Western academia have no experience or understanding of meditation and all the meditative traditions. So that's another way we could defend Wilbur is that the fact that at least he's taking that on in an experimental way by doing those practices, by being a Zen monk for a while and doing Vajrayana and doing all these things and also taking on the Western philosophy, taking on East and West, rather than the thing that bothers me about the cultural war is it's sort of the West versus the terrible East. It's a regression to kind of I think a West East sort of artificial divide. Mhm.
Well, I mean, that was like, I don't know, that was like hundreds of years ago, no? It's like the culture wars now, it's not like against the East per se.
Yes, it is. It's against Islam. It's against everything that it comes from the East, or it's against, it tends to be a defense of the Christian West. That's still going on. That's my sort of critique of the whole, of the right wing kind of, neo-Christian movement. It's a defense of the West against the East. I mean, against Eastern thinking. Whereas the brilliant Christians like Thomas Merton and other people went to the East and they learned something from those cultures and brought them back. That
But the
would be
East
more.
is way more than just Islam. The
No,
East
no.
is
I
like
I I just said to Thomas Merton and that he went to Tibet, he went to India, he went
But you
to.
said you said that there's a divide, Western Eastern, but the Eastern is just the problem is just Islam. The problem is not Tibetan Buddhism or Hinduism or Lao Tzu or Confucianism. It's just Islam, and
Oh,
there and
well, extreme
so that
Islam, yeah, yeah. Which you could say is very Western. Yeah, I see what you mean, but no, no. What I mean is there seems to be this defense of the West, right? It's a defense of the West that doesn't integrate the East, which dismisses people like Wilbur who have looked at the East and looked at Eastern thinking even your beloved Aleister Crowley who went to the East and learned yoga and learned all those things which don't exist in the West, and we need those things. We need yoga and meditation, and we need Eastern psychotechnologies, and we need because they're way deeper than they went way further than the Western ones did. In a sense, on one level, whereas the West went further and obviously in technology and
I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I think, if you like if you look at what Wilbur was doing, or Beatles, or Bob Dylan, or you mentioned James Joyce, what these people were doing, they were tapping into some archetypal architectural problems that come with existence per se, let's say. And so they were
Mhm.
tapping into these old things and dressing them up in a way that people could understand them now, basically. Like, so it's like if you lack the depth, if Wilbur would have lacked the depth of idealism, or whatever, he wouldn't have become
Or
famous. That's
psychoanalysis
Yeah,
or
that's just what it is. You
yeah.
can't. It's like a symbol that has to be like a magical symbol that has to be like charged with energy. And
Mhm.
where does the energy come from? It comes from the depth of the abyss. Because you charge, you know, something with energies that go way beyond your ego, way
Mhm.
beyond the profane. It's like you're tapping into something old, into some primal structures. And if you don't do that while charging like a symbol, then the symbol has no force. And the same goes for a symbol, like if you want to treat Wilbur as a symbol. It's like his endeavor wouldn't have any cultural power if he wouldn't have tapped into some very, very profound and
Right. He
deep.
would have been, and he would have remained on an academic level, which.
Right. And so the same goes for Beatles. I mean,
Mhm.
it's like we're always pretending like there were not so many bands around, the 50s, 60s, you know, but I mean, these guys, I mean, it's just so funny. It's like I've read like a comparison between the Beatles and the Stones, and I mean this was already done ad nauseum. But the main difference is that says the writer that the Beatles came from Liverpool, and these were tough guys, like tough street thugs. Basically,
Yeah.
while the Rolling Stones were always like puffy guys from London, and always a little bit gay, not in the gay sense, but in the sense of a little bit superficial. And so that was the main difference, that you could have a street fight with John Lennon. You could have, or
Yeah,
with
maybe
Ringo,
that's
but you
it's
couldn't
funny
have like, hmm?
because the interesting thing is it's counterintuitive because the Stones always posture as the tough guys, right?
Right. Yeah,
Whereas the
yeah,
Beatles are a bit like Beatles are a bit sentimental and sweet and kind of annoying in that way. Whereas if when you get sick of the Beatles, it's nice to hear something a bit. It feels like the Stones have an edgy rhythm and blues quality that the Beatles kind of lack when you get bored of all that sweet harmonies and melodies, and you just want the straightforward kind of. I think actually drummers are very important. The thing is, the Stones are kind of overrated in one way. But their drummer, the simplicity of his kind of driving drums beats,
yeah,
that's the Stones. It's just it's super simple. But
right.
but he wasn't like Ginger Baker and the guy from the Who, and he just played this very simple simple swing beat. He got a bit from jazz, which that made the Stones. That's all they are really. I mean, the rest of it is just like jumping around and
Yeah,
rhythm and blues borrowed from black artists. But the beat and the same thing with one of my favorite, Zeppelin, the John Bonham of of Zeppelin.
yeah,
He played drums like thunderously.
yeah,
And the drummer, it's the drum, even Ringo too. So I think the drummers are very interesting. Like we always
right.
look at the singers and the bass players and this and that, but go to the drummers
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you'll
yeah,
find the root of what the power of that particular form of art was.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, John Bonham, Ringo Starr, these are still considered the top drummers of all
No, no,
time.
but what's his name from the Stones as well? Even though he's very understated, right?
Right.
What's his name? The guy from the Stones?
See, I don't
No,
even know. That's the fucking point.
no,
That's the
he's this guy, kind of anonymous looking guy. No, he but that's the power of the Stones is his rhythms,
Yeah, but
and
what is his name?
well, I forgot his name, but he
Yeah,
has a
why?
name. People know who
Why?
he is.
Why?
Why
Why
did I
did you?
forget his name?
Yeah, why do
Because I
I
have
know his?
name dyslexia. I forget names.
But you
That's
didn't
the only
forget
reason.
your Bonham.
What?
You
John
didn't
Bonham,
forget.
no.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
I mean.
actually, to tell you the truth, I agree with you. I'm not a big fan of the Stones,
There you go.
but I understand like the certain albums and the power of that kind of like rhythm and blues beat. I'm not a fan of Mick Jagger jumping around. Who cares? I mean,
I mean, you are a musician, so you have to appreciate what they were doing, like on
yeah,
the technical level, because I
on the
mean,
technical level.
it's still the fucking Rolling Stones, right?
I
But
like the
I'm
guy. I like Keith Richards too, because he just sits there and plays, and he has a sort of unique way of playing. He has like only five strings on his guitar, and
yeah,
so
because Keith
he
Richards
doesn't
could have
show off,
been.
but he's way cooler than they're cooler than the Beatles, basically. The Beatles might be better, in terms of musicality and influence and da da da, but the Stones are cooler. In
I
the
think
early days, they were cooler.
Richards. I think Keith
They didn't have
Richards.
moppy hair. They weren't cute, right? The Beatles
I
are so
think.
cute. That's
I think.
disgusting.
I think Keith Richards could have been played and played very well with John Lennon because it's like this. There's a similar energy there, and it's like
Yeah.
he's the only one um, from the Rolling Stones that could have contended really as being for being a Beatles member.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I sort of agree. Yeah. I kind of agree. I think, yeah, if there, I mean, obviously John was the coolest guy in the Beatles, you know, and then Harrison became cool kind of later on, but the Beatles weren't very cool.
Before we forget that,
Uh-huh.
we wanted, to say that because frankly, Andrew and I we both suck at marketing, no?
Oh yeah,
And
we're not marketers. We're like we need people to market for us. We need marketers and we need tech people and see because we want to compete with Peterson Academy. We want to be better than Peterson Academy because
hmm,
so we need people to help us with the maquillage with to make us more pretty than we are.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
we got the raw content, We're like, you know, who are we like in um
I was just thinking about this. So if you, I mean, like in a completely different context. So if you argue with Robert Sapolsky that there's no free will, right? And so, like, let's take that for granted.
mhm.
Let's assume that there is no free will. So every uttering of the word I want to, I will do this or whatever. Let's just cut that from our way of speaking. So it's like if instead of I want to go, I will go to the cinema, you would say because of my past, I feel compelled to go to the cinema. Just as an example. So you
Mhm.
cut the word will and want just right out of your dictionary. And then look at what kind of universe that is, and if you want to live in that universe, and that in which that don't word doesn't exist, and it makes if you apply that, it makes our existence miserable and empty and sad, and if that's what Sapolsky wants, we should absolutely oppose that because the word of will and want make our life rich and explorative and adventurous and all of these
Mhm.
kind of things, just on an intuitive level.
Well
And
said,
and
yeah.
and I think in a kind of way, it's like whatever you might think about the Beatles or Rolling Stones or however you rate them, is I mean, what they do is they're just beautiful flowers, right? And our universe would be so much poorer without them tapping into Bach or whatever they were doing.
Yeah.
this little flowery thing they put on top of existence, which is miserable, Um,
Yeah,
but to
well,
listen, but to
totally.
listen to Abbey Road, it's always a pleasure to listen to the White Album, to Let It Be, to the album, to a Magical Mystery Tour, to Sergeant Pepper's, to all of these things. It just takes the shiny pink, you know, thing and puts it on top of a round of
A
existence and
shiny
gives it.
pink thing, exactly.
Yeah. Which
Well, no, I'm teasing. I'm all, I sort of agree. I just think that there is a point where these little flowers have to die and then new flowers have to take their places. And
well,
I remember, what's his name? Michael Stipe of REM saying he was so sick of the Beatles. It's like, give up the Beatles. On the other hand, he was probably very, very influenced on the Beatles, even though he didn't even want to be, he was probably using the Beatles. And so yeah, there is a way you sort of gratitude for what came before and but also let it go a bit. So
I
that
mean,
new things can
there's this
move in
famous
their
interview
place.
with
And
David Bowie.
I'm tired of another Beatles documentary, another, it's like, can we, it feels like we're rehashing the Beatles over and over again because we haven't come up with something, with that, or something, to replace them with, which, or maybe they're irreplaceable. I don't know.
I mean, there's this famous interview with David Bowie, and he says, and it's very interesting what he says. He says that, especially, in the beginning of the 70s, all of the artists were compelled to hate the Beatles because there were, I mean, not because of their merit, not because that they were bad or good or anything, just because they were so pervasive of culture, because they represented culture as it were. They were so
Yeah.
deep embedded and ingrained into music and everything that the only way for new artists to emerge were to create like a kind of antithesis to this. And all of the experiments of the 70s punk and everything, that was all in reaction to just one band, which is insane if you think
No,
about
not
it.
just one band. Come
No,
on.
I'm
There's the
saying
Doors and
I'm saying what David Bowie said.
yeah.
So you had to, because it's like that was the spirit in that time, that you had to hate the Beatles because you had to create a distance in order to create something new,
Mhm.
right? And so that's an interesting thought.
It's
That
just like kill the father or whatever. You have to, that's part of the growing stage, right? Kill your image of the father or kill the father's intense influence on you and find something new. But
Yeah, but there's still, I mean, the problem with the Beatles, and I don't know if it's a problem. It's like I've read it in another article, like it was a big piece in a German newspaper. It came out, at the moment when the documentary came out. It's like, and it says like to hate the Beatles, like to hate the sun. It's
come
like,
on.
it's like because it's so deeply ingrained in our culture by now. It's like it's just you can't get rid of it. It's so much. And I mean, there are different movements now, and it's all fine and well, but it's like that's part of our cultural DNA. And it's like you can't hate your own DNA. It's like unless you have an autoimmune disorder, and you should have a critical distance, but it's part of us.
Mhm.
Blackbird, as long as human existence, goes
Yeah,
on.
but on the other hand, there's 10,000 million songs that are just as good or better than Blackbird. I mean, we can't exaggerate, and probably there's many songs that nobody. I was thinking about this, about how we idolize things, right? How we have to idolize something, right? We have to idolize the Beatles and say they were the great. I mean, I'm pushing back here, okay? Because I'm not, and it has nothing to do with the Beatles in general. It's that it's that we tend to bow down, right, to something that's supposed to be culturally important. Whereas, I knew a guy who's never had a record in his life and probably has 10,000 times more talent than Paul McCartney, but he never even put out a record. So why are we so focused on these cultural people that are, and they got famous? That's the only difference, and they sort of tapped into the larger archetype. Doesn't mean that that they're better than a lot of people who never even became famous at all. So why should I idolize that particular uh, thing just because just because it why should I like another example, it's like why should I care about um a president? Even if in a normal life I wouldn't care about this person.
I can tell you why.
Because of his huge symbolic power in the society, but that huge symbolic power in the society is not always aligned. It might be aligned with something, but we put too much significance on those kind of iconic figures, and
I can
that
tell you why.
limits us. That makes us not hear other things.